Awesome. All right. So she's got it. We're at the very, very bottom paragraph of page 63. And where we're going to be diving in is step 4, which is, bear with me, more exciting than it probably feels like. I should have been wearing my Inventory Behooves Me hoodie. I didn't plan this well. But that would have been the perfect hoodie to wear. But yeah, we're picking up very, very, very bottom of page 63. And what we did last week is we covered step 3. And the third step is simply, I won't say just because it's a pretty big decision. It is simply a decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like our life depends on it, because it does. And that's simply all it is a decision. And so now we got to follow that decision up with some action. So it says, next we launched. And it's a little rude because next is like right now, like next, like we got to do it. Welcome, page 63, bottom paragraph. Next, so we got to dive. And then it says, we launched, which like indicates a level of vigor, a level of intensity. You know what I mean? It's not next we took a leisurely stroll. Next we sauntered. Next we, do you remember for a while there that there was that like walking exercise where they would like dance as they walked? I can't remember what that was called, but not that. It said launch. Yeah. Launched with some velocity. Because keep in mind, what are we after? We're after the 4th dimension of existence. I'm after a spiritual awakening. And we get catapulted and we get rocketed. And to get there, we need to launch. So we've got to dive into this work, dive into this way of life. And I'm going to say out on a course of vigorous action. Again, it's telling us with some intensity, I've got to dive in to this 4th step, dive into 4 through 9, not to take my time, not to, wade into the swimming pool slowly, cannonball this stuff. Dive in, not belly flop, cannonball. Belly flop if you want, you do you. It's your inventory. And it says the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. And if you guys remember from last week, we were talking about how, somebody like me, I got fired from the management position of my life. And then we spoke about how we had these different ways in which we could orientate ourselves to this power. And one was, he is the principal, we are his agents. And this is not what it means, but double O Paige, secret agent Paige, boop-a-doo! I'm gonna do a super cool agent job. Woo! I wish I knew the theme song to the James Bond, but I really don't. There's a lot of important information that just not has landed in this brain. But so I'm like, ooh, where's my watch? Where's my jetpack? Where's my fancy car? And then it goes on 63. Next we launched. Cool. Like I get like a jetpack. Amazing. I'm so here for this secret agent mission. And then the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. Oh man, like I got fired from management and then I got relegated to spiritual janitorial duties. Lame. This is not the promotion I thought this was going to be. All right. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. And that's fair. That idea that many of us have never attempted this process. Like this is not a thing that I had ever done or begun to look at, which is deep inner Paige stuff. I had never looked at myself at this level. So it says, though our decision, now that decision was step 3. That is step 3. It was a vital and crucial step. So step 3 is vital. Step 3 is crucial. Step 3 is important. I'm not going to minimize the third step, but it could have little permanent effect. And if you're an alcoholic like I'm an alcoholic, I need a permanent effect, because what's coming down the pike, what is inevitable, what is imminent, what is going to happen for somebody like me is the first drink. So I need something that's going to have a permanent effect. And a decision by itself is not going to have any permanent effect unless, and this is rude, because it says at once. At once. That's like right now. Like, that's not like, can I do it on the weekend? That's like right now. At once, which again is pointing to the timeline, which is quickly, right now, do it, go. At once, followed by and again, this is just synonyms to bum everyone out. Strenuous effort. Oh man, strenuous, like with some actual exertion. Like, I gotta do it, dive in, like, rude. I was really hoping I could have like some laurels to rest upon. What is this course of action? Next thing you know, the next chapter is going to be into action. Like, this is really action heavy, you guys. It's quite a spiritual workout. Don't you worry, we're going to be getting our spiritual gains. Gonna get buff spiritually. So it says, unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. So when we look at the things in ourselves which had been blocking us, maybe it's intuitive, but I'll promise you it wasn't for me. Blocking me from what? What am I blocked from? And the answer to that is God. The things in myself that is blocking me from God. If you don't use the word God, that's fine. Creator, higher power, universe, spirit of the universe. Blocking me from the power which I need. And so what I need to begin to do is to face and to really have a look at so that I can be rid of. So I got to see what they are to get rid of them. The things that are blocking me from this power. Ultimately, what 4 through 9 is going to do, it is going to clear away the channel between me and this power. And it says, our liquor was but a symptom. What? What? No, it was a couple weeks ago. We had all those like, what? I thought alcohol was my problem. No, alcohol is a symptom of my greater problem. Now, the first of the greater problems is that I have an obsession of the mind that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink. And I've got to be free of that. But beneath that, what we have is a spiritual malady. What we have is a conscious sense of separateness from God. It's not a conscious separation from God, because I can never be separate from God. It is a conscious sense of the separateness from God. And that is what I need to treat. Because when that is untreated in an alcoholic, I'll have the mental obsession and I will drink again. And because I'm an alcoholic, because I have the physical allergy, what that means is to drink is to die. And if you hear that and you kind of wrestle up against that, I promise you, there is more than one type of death that I can experience. So you know what? I'm here with you guys today and I've experienced some death, you know? And so I've got to be free of that. So liquor was but a symptom. I have got to treat the root problem, which is the conscious sense of separateness from God. So I've got to clear away the stuff that's blocking me from God. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. We had to see the truth. And so when it talks about a house cleaning, I have this metaphor, and it's a metaphor that I'm sure some of you are probably sick of by now, but some of you haven't heard it. So sorry for those that are sick of it. So what I believe is at the very depth of my soul that there is a spiritual house. There's a spiritual house right at the very, very depth of my soul. And if you are picking up what I'm throwing down, what I want you to know is at the very depth of your soul, there is a spiritual house. I'll preface this with all my metaphors are consensual. You do not need to have if you're like, no, I don't want one, you don't have one. I'm not talking about you. That's fine. But what I will say is if you're picking up what I'm throwing down, you're in for this metaphor. What I want you to know is in the depth of your soul, there is a spiritual house. And I want you to know that that house is good. That house is wonderful. That house is immaculate. Like, oh girl, is that a Frank Lloyd Wright that you got in that spiritual house? That's the only architect I know. And I know it because there's a gentleman by the name of Michael in South Dakota, and he makes a similar but different reference. And he references Frank Lloyd Wright. So that's the only architect I know. But girl, is that a Frank Lloyd Wright? I really, at this point, should have Googled other architects, so I had a variety to choose from. It's no spiritual McMansion that you got over there. That's a spiritual house. And it is good, and it is worthy, and it is valuable. And you should see the property value on that spiritual house of yours. Like, it's amazing. Now, I'm going back to my house. I'm not talking about your house, not yours. We're talking about mine right now. The problem with mine, not yours, is that I am a bit of a hoarder. Like calling TLC, calling the cameras. I am a hoarder. And I want you to know it is bad. You can smell it from down the block. Like, it is bad. And in my spiritual house, again, I want to point out the house itself is good, but I've been hoarding on to these things that I don't need. Now, I know none of you guys can relate to this part of the metaphor. This is just me talking to me. But I got these things, I know, who would have them, called resentments? Just me. And my resentments, they're like newspapers that are decades old. Yes, decades. I've been alive for more than one of them. Decades, but they are decades old, and they are piled all the way from floor to ceiling. And you know what happens when you have stacks and stacks and stacks of newspapers that are piled all the way from floor to ceiling? What that means is it blocks out the windows, and that light can't come in. And I'm sitting in that home in darkness. And I've got these things. I know you guys can't relate to this, but I got these things, and they are called fears. And my fears are like empty bottles and cans that are strewn all over the floor. And you see, I'm in darkness, so I can't see where I step, and I can't see where I stand. And anytime I move, they clank and clang and clatter and sound bigger and louder than they really are. And I know I'm the only one, but I got this stuff. Sex harms, that relationship conduct. I know, just me. It's just me. They're a little like the dead cats behind the freezer. I know they're there. I can smell them. And I want to be very clear. No animals were harmed in the making of this metaphor. It is only a metaphor. No animals were harmed. And so what do I got to do? I've got to begin to clean that house. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go have a look at those newspapers, and I'm going to pull them down one by one by one. And I'm going to put them into garbage bags and into boxes. And wouldn't you know, as I pull down these newspapers one by one, I have a look at them. Like, I really have a look at them. And wouldn't you know it, the information was wrong the whole time. I thought it said extra, extra. You're all jerks and everybody's doing it wrong. Turns out I was the jerk. Now, if you have written inventory before, you know intimately that there is only freedom in finding out that you're the jerk. That's really where the freedom lies. There is no freedom if they are the jerk, because I can't do anything about that. But there's freedom in that I'm the jerk. And so I pull down these newspapers one by one, and I start putting them into bags and into boxes. And as I do that, I start to clear away that window. And that light begins to come into the house. And throughout this book, what we see time and time again is the metaphor of God as light. And I love that metaphor, because light is not simply what I see. Light is also the way in which I see. Now you might be like, what? What are you talking about? Like, girl, what? Yeah, can you say that again? Yeah. So light is not just or simply what I see. I got this light on. I don't simply just see that light. Light is also the way in which I see. So bear with me. See, I got this room just around the corner here, and there's no windows in the room. There's no light. The light is turned off. And if I go around that corner and I turn on that light, everything in that room has changed. And yet nothing in that room has changed. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. Let's have a look at our lives. Anyone here done a 4th step? And anyone here, as the result of your 4th step, your childhood got better? Childhood didn't change. Family got better? I promise you, family didn't change. They know the buttons because they installed them. You know what I'm saying? The jerks on the highway, they start to drive a little bit better. I promise you, they haven't changed. How I see them has changed. And wouldn't you know it, it is often, now I can't see it in myself. I can never see it in myself, but I can see it in you. You know, when you're working with an alcoholic, isn't it when the light starts to come on right when they get to that fourth column and they start seeing how they're the jerk? Isn't that when the light starts to come on in their eyes? Doesn't that make sense? And then I begin to, because that light's coming in through the windows and I can begin to see reality. I can see how if I rely on that light, I don't need to step in the fear. Those empty bottles and those empty cans, and I begin to clean them up. And I put them into bags, I put them into boxes. And then I deal with the cats. No cats were harmed in the making of this metaphor. I know you're just giving that one a cuddle. No cats were harmed. But we deal with them. And I clean them up. And what I do is I begin to create a sane, sound ideal so that I can be a responsible spiritual pet owner in the future. An ideal for this area of my life. And in the fifth step, when I sit down with God and another human being, what am I doing? I'm getting all of those bags, all of the boxes, all of the garbage, all of the mess, and I am getting it out of the house. And I take it to the curb. And step 6 is all about becoming willing. And step 7 is all about asking for the cosmic garbage man to come and take it away. See, if you don't like the word God, you don't have to use it. You can use cosmic garbage man, spiritual 1-800-GOT-JUNK guy, but I'll let you know God is only one syllable. And a lot easier to say than dear spiritual 1-800-GOT-JUNK guy, and that's what I do. I ask for it to go. Now, what I do is I will go from there. I will go from there and I will make amends, because I didn't just make a mess in my house. I made a mess in the lives of some other people, and I will set those right. I will clean up that mess. And then what do I need to do in step 10 and in step 11? I need to continue to clean that house. And I do that for a number of reasons. The first reason I continue to clean that house is, I don't know if you saw how bad it was when I got here. Oh, girl, I cannot, if it ever, and I mean ever, gets as bad as it did that day, I'm going to drink again. I cannot stay sober with a house, spiritual house. Never mind what my actual house looks like, but a spiritual house that is as messy as that. Because I'll be back in the darkness. And if I am in the darkness, I will drink again. Now, the other reason I got to continue to keep that house clean, and it really is like cleaning the house. Like, I've got to do that big hoarder's clean, that big, deep clean. And that's what we're going to do in step 4. But I use the same techniques, the same columns that I'm going to use in the 10th step, and then I'm going to use in the evening review. And there might be times when life just hits and I need to dive into the columns again. So bear with me with that. So I got to continue to clean that house. And in the 10th step, what happens is a little like spilling. I don't drink coffee anymore. That's not a moral thing. My stomach stopped handling it. I don't think I'm better than coffee. I miss it so much. But it's like I spill my tea or I spill my coffee. In the moment, I see that and I want to clean it up. And so that's like my 10th step. And then at the end of the day, in theory, there is some stuff that I got to clean up. Maybe it's the dishes. Maybe maybe the people who went to treatment and still make their bed. I've never done that. But you know what I mean? Those daily things and some of those daily house cleaning items. And that's a little like my evening review, anything that I missed. And then every once in a while, maybe there's some strong winds and it knocks down some branches, or I got to do a bit of a spring cleaning and I got to get into the eaves troughs. I'm going to continue to clean the house. And I do that for 3 reasons. The first is I can't ever let it get as messy as it did that day, the day that I got here. because if it ever gets that bad again, I'm going to drink again. The second reason that I've got to continue to clean my house is my very life as an ex-problem drinker depends upon my constant thought of others and how I might help meet their needs. My very life depends on helping others and showing them how to keep their house clean. It does no good if I show you like a mop or a Swiffer. I can't think of vacuum. I'm trying to think of fancy cleaning things, and I can't think of anything super. A duster. That's not fancy. I don't got a fancy cleaning anything. A fancy steamer that you got on Timo. That's for Kathy. But like it does no good if I'm like, use the fancy steamer, and you're like, I don't know how it works, and I'm like, just figure it out. I don't know. I need to show you. My life depends on showing you how to use the mop, how to use the broom, how to clean the house. My very life depends on it. So that is the second reason I've got to continue to keep my house clean. And the third reason is I've got a roommate. Now, I don't feel like many people on here spend any time on Vine back in the day, but there's that famous Vine where it's like, and they were roommates. And that is just peak comedy for me. So I'm only making me laugh with that. But I got a roommate. You see, one of the places in which God can be found is that there is a room at the very depth of that house. There's a room at the very depth of my soul. And that is one of the places in which God resides. And if I continue to keep this house clean, then I get to know this power better. I get to build a relationship with this power. I get to have an experience with this power. And so I need to keep this house clean. But I've got to clean it first and learn how to do it. So, at page 64, it says, therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Keep in mind, the business of Paige Surviving Incorporated was a business. I was management. And we were in the red, guys. Like, oh, I was bankrupt. I was physically, morally, spiritually, like I was bankrupt. Like my life, dumpster that is on fire and careening toward a cliff. Terrible. And I did no inventory. And I talk about it like, if there is anyone who is least qualified to manage my life, it's me. Because I was doing everything in my power to end it. And if I managed anything as poorly as my life, I would be fired. If I managed a Blockbuster, because Blockbusters, actually lately it's like, ooh, Blockbuster might make a comeback. But for a long time there, Blockbuster, nobody was expecting Blockbuster to, low stakes on that one, right? I'd be fired. Now, in the business that is my life, I need to take inventory. Business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is not a shaming process. It is not a demoralizing process. It is not to belittle the company. If you've ever been involved in an inventory for a company or an organization, you don't go around the company and like, this sucks. Well, maybe you do if you have to do a big inventory, but that's your inner monologue when the managers aren't around. But that idea, like you're not saying this sucks. This is the worst company that ever existed. I hate it here. Well, again, inner monologue, but that's not what we're reporting in the inventory. We are trying to just see the facts about what is working and what is not. And it says, it is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. All we are trying to see is the truth. And sometimes we're afraid because it's like, I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. It was already there. What I will find is already there. And it says one object. So one purpose of the inventory is to disclose, to see damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. So imagine, I used to work at a grocery store many years ago, and I worked night shift. And we didn't really do too much of an inventory, like a full inventory, but you'd have to go and see, and you'd have to see what items needed to be reordered, what items were not selling, what items were damaged and had to be thrown out. And at no point did I like tropes around the grocery store being like, that sucks, we hate it, and we hate you, and you smell bad, to the inventory process. Like, we just saw, okay, this product is damaged. We've got to chuck it. We've got to make a note of it, and we got to get rid of it. This isn't selling. Let's not buy more. This we need more of. Let's get more. And it's the exact same thing with my life. It was of no value, those times that I was doing ordering for the grocery store, if I were to be like, but I love this broken jar of pickles. I know it's leaking all over, but it's my broken jar of pickles. It is a safety hazard. There's like, no, we just get rid of it. And it doesn't mean that I'm bad. Doesn't mean the store is bad. It's just not working. So it says, if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. I need to see what is truly going on with my life and what is not working so that I can get rid of it. And by the way, if we're afraid of get rid of, be free of it. Be free of it. Because the stuff that I'm getting rid of is the stuff that was killing me. The stuff that I am getting rid of is the stuff that was holding me trapped in the bondage of self. So it says, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. Again, not that I suck. I'm the biggest piece of garbage. That's not the inventory we're writing. We're just trying to see what is not working and what is blocking me from this power. And it says, first, we consider the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. Wait a minute, when did I agree that it was self manifested in various ways that's what defeated me? When did that happen? It happened last week on page 62, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. That's when we cop to it in the third step, right? So that's when, sorry, some of you weren't expecting like that literal of an answer last week, right? So we self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations of self. So what we're going to do in this inventory process is we are going to look at the common manifestations of self. And for our purpose, what we will say is that those will be resentments and fears and sex conduct. The 3 sections of our 4-step inventory. And I might be overly clear, but the reason I'm doing this is because I have sponsored a lot of people and I have routinely pointed this out and then reiterated and pointed it out again. And I can't tell you how many times we get done resentments and the sponsee is like, I'm done my 4th step. And I have to be the big bad jerk that's like, girl, we're a third of the way. Oh no, So I just 3 sections, resentments, boom, fears, boom. And then we're going to have a look at sex conduct, boom. 3 sections. All right. So, and actually before we get into the first section of our 4th step, it is really helpful to talk about, okay, how do I do this, right? How do I do a 4th step? How do I even get started? So before we get into resentments, let's talk about it. The first thing that I will ask a sponsee to do is to get a notebook and to get a pen. You can stay sober with pencil, but I mean, it's gonna rub and it doesn't work, but you can stay sober on pencil. So get a notebook and get a pen. And what I would do is I would suggest, man, this is for the stationary nerds. I would suggest A4, this should be A4. Oh my goodness. But like this size, like a big old regular sheet of paper sized. To be honest with you, the bigger the better. And I will say in my experience, 80 pages is a little thin. Now bear with me with this, because this is not the most eco-friendly. If you're like, I want to save the trees, we're going to have to recycle. And so, yeah, Kathy's got it. She's got her notebook. Ooh, that one. Ooh, is that a Hilroy? I don't know if that brand is everywhere else. I don't know if it's Canadian or not. But get you a notebook. Now, this is a Paige suggestion. This second part is not in the book. It's implied get some paper to write on in the book, but I would recommend get a pen that you like writing with. It doesn't have to be expensive. Or two. Yeah, Kathy, get two. Fair. She knows what's coming. She knows what's coming. But get a pen that you like writing with. Doesn't have to be expensive. Doesn't have to be fancy. But don't get that pen, where you gotta it's sticky. It's like you gotta write to try to get it to flow again. Maybe do that lighter trick where you put it in a lighter for a little bit. Some of you guys know. Some of you guys know. Most of you don't. Never mind. I've never done that. That would be weird. But get a pen that you like writing with. It does not matter what it is, because we're going to be doing some writing. Yeah, if you, or the ink blobs. Yeah, don't get it too inky, and then your fourth step will turn into a Rorschach test. I'm just kidding. You get it as inky as you want. I like an inky pen. I like inky, I like black, but the color of the pen does not matter. And so before we do it's true, later on I was going to say we get them before us in black and white. If you are a blue ink person, you can stay sober. If you're wild and funky and you're a pink ink person, you can stay sober. Yellow ink is really hard to read, so I don't know about that. But you can, just as pen, paper, boom. And before we do any writing on our fourth step, the first thing we want to do, and if we aren't picking up, if we have to go and get a notebook right after our third step, if we don't have one before our third step, we'll do this. And we always want to, anytime I'm doing any writing on my fourth step, I want to start with a prayer. Now, you can use whatever words that you want to use. You can use any prayer. You can use a third step prayer, anything. But I like to say something like, God, I ask that you be with me as I dive into this inventory process. I pray that you would guide my thoughts, guide my mind, guide my heart, guide my pen. Help me to see the truth about myself. Help me to see the things in me that are blocking me from you. Help me to be fearless and thorough. Your will, not mine, be done. It doesn't have to be that, but just something that's help me to write, because I don't want to do it, right? And then whenever we are done writing our inventory, it can be really helpful, for the day. We crunk out. That crunk is not a word in this context. We write a whole bunch. Yeah, I know. We get what we get, and we do our best. But at the end of writing for the day, we close down our book. It is also really helpful to say a prayer. And a prayer that is really helpful to say is something like, again, you use whatever prayer you want to do, but a prayer that I like to use is something like, God, I pray that you would help me to leave my thoughts, my feelings, and my emotions contained within this notebook. Help me to go be of service to you and to my fellows as I go out from here. Something like that. That's like, help me to leave the big old feelers in the notebook. Help me help others. That sort of deal. So the very first action that I'm going to take, I got my notebook, I got a pen here, I got my pen, is what I'm going to do is I am going to draw lines. And it's going to be one line about halfway across the page and then 2 lines up to create 3 columns on top and 1 column on the bottom. And then I'm going to flip the page. You can use a ruler. You don't have to use a ruler. The fact that I said you don't have to use a ruler, I know bothered some people so much when I said that. I know us. There are people that are like, no, I don't need a ruler. And then they're like, oh, how dare you suggest I make it without a ruler? So 1 line at the bottom, 2 lines up. Flip the page. 1 line at the bottom, 2 lines up. And so, and then there's a question, what a computer spreadsheet? Yeah. So here's the thing. I do believe the question was, can I do it on a computer? I won't say a hard no. because I know that there are people who have disabilities where physical handwriting is not accessible to them, so I don't want to ever have a hard rule. But here's my experience. It is better to put pen to paper and to write with your hand. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, yeah, pen to paper if possible. Absolutely. The first reason for that is because we might be like, hey, they didn't have Excel in the 1930s. Yeah, but they had typewriters. The big book was mostly written by Bill Wilson dictating and Ruth Hawk typing it out. So they had typewriters. The other is, now bear with me, I used to be a tutor. And I worked a lot, like adult tutoring. And there is really a connection that is made in your brain when you write it out, in note-taking, in repetition that way. So there is immense cognitive value, as well as Bill Wilson didn't dictate his and don't use AI to make your inventory either. That's a new one that I had to be like, no, we're not doing that, no. So we draw these lines. So one line, again, horizontal, about halfway down the page, and 2 lines up to create 1, 2, 3, and then 4. That's what we're doing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to write lines on 50 pages, to be honest with you. This is not going to be the most paper-friendly project. It's going to be about like 50 pages. Now, bear with me with that. I promise there is spiritual value in drawing the lines. A lot of times, many of us, we approach the 4th step with a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation, and a lot of overwhelm. Well, sitting down and drawing lines is a simple action to get us involved in the inventory process. It's something I do a lot. I'll talk about this. I do a lot of hand holding in step 4. I don't need to, I will, but I don't need to hand holding drawing the lines. It's a simple thing. Now, this is AA, singleness of purpose, but I will say, most of us weren't afraid of doing lines before. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't afraid of doing lines when I was out there. So I'm not going to be scared of doing lines right now, And just like when I was out there, can't do too many lines, just go crazy with those. So we draw those lines. And that same page format of 1 line halfway horizontally across the page and 2 lines from that vertically going to the very top, we're going to use that page format, that paper format, how I do it, through resentments, fears, and sex conduct. So truly, no paper is going to be wasted in that way. So you really can't do too many lines. And some of you are like, I know. And that accelerated my alcoholism, and then I ended up here. So, ta-da. but right, here we are. So that's how we're gonna, set up our inventory and set us up to dive in. So going back to the reading, page 64. Oh, no worries. Let me see if I can get that. Hold on. Let me do that and see if that'll work for you. All right. So it says, bottom of page 64, resentment is the number 1 offender. Now, when we talk about resentment, its etymological origins, because I'm fun at parties. Honestly, I got here and I thought I was too cool for God. And I am somebody who has very strong stationary preferences, very, very strong stationary preferences. We'll just go on an etymology tangent in the middle of the thing. So resentment, it comes from a French word which simply means to re-feel. I feel like if I try to say it in a French accent, I'm just going to make it really, when your brain's not there to say words in a different language, I'm like, I don't got it. So re-feel. So what we're looking at is a re-feeling of a negative emotion. And it says resentment is the number 1 offender. Number 1 offender. So this is the thing that is really kicking my butt. And it says it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. So one of the things is when we get into the first column of resentments, the biggest thing is do not self-edit. If it comes to mind, write it down. And I'm going to reiterate that as we continue on, but do not self-edit. If it comes to mind, write it down. So resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it, as in resentments, from resentments, stem all forms of spiritual disease. So all forms of spiritual illness can come from a single resentment. We're trying to say this is heavy. We don't want to minimize these things. Not that you guys would ever minimize a resentment, but we don't want to minimize it. We want to we got to get free of it. And it says, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And when we talk about being mentally ill, what we're talking about is the obsession of the mind, the mental obsession. And when we talk about being physically ill, what we are talking about is the physical allergy. So in step 1, we dive in to the obsession of the mind and the physical allergy. That's what we are focusing on in step 1. And we hammer that home. Physical allergy, mental obsession. Physical allergy, mental obsession. But then you'll notice as we went into step 2, we began to talk about these things that were right after we lay aside the drink problem. We're talking about the bedevilments. We saw in the last few weeks what happens when we try to fix and manage and run our lives ourselves. And we spoke about selfishness, self-centeredness, that being the root of our troubles. And so it goes on to say we have been spiritually sick. What we are referencing is the spiritual malady. The spiritual malady. And that spiritual malady is the conscious sense of separateness from God. Now, the spiritual malady is not limited to alcoholics, but the spiritual malady is what is fueling the obsession of the mind. And that obsession of the mind compels me to take that first drink. I take that first drink. It sets off the allergy. Off I go. And so it says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And that is the order. I've got to treat the spiritual malady first. When I treat that emptiness, when I treat that sense of separateness from God, when I treat that loneliness, when I treat that hole in the depth of my soul, and I treat that with a spiritual awakening, when that is treated, the obsession is gone. Because there's nothing fueling that obsession. When the obsession is gone, I don't take that first drink. And if I don't take that first drink, I don't set off the allergy. So I treat the spiritual malady to alleviate the obsession of the mind. And if the obsession of the mind is gone, there is no reason to take that first drink. And I know that to be true because my spiritual malady, genuinely, bringing it back to the coffee thing, my spiritual malady does not fuel an obsession of the mind with coffee. My stomach was like, nope, coffee, not for you anymore, which was depressing. It was like, nope, you can't do that. And as soon as I realized that the coffee was setting off my nausea and I couldn't drink it anymore, I said, that's it, I'm done. I have not had to go back to it again and again and again and again. I had a little bit of let's see if I can at the beginning, maybe, but it became very clear that no, I couldn't. And you see, as an alcoholic, my main problem is not what happens once I start to drink. My main problem is that I go back to the drink. My main problem is the mental obsession and what is fueling that. And this is what we treat in Alcoholics Anonymous, is the spiritual malady. So it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So again, pen to paper. I know typewriters are on paper, but Excel does not count. To be fair, unless you have a disability that makes it where you can't do pen to paper, and pen to paper is too difficult. But hold on, let me bring up. Here we are. Boom, boom. So this is how I set up the paper. So again, one line horizontally, and I'll make sure I put the image into the chat later, and I'll do that. So one line horizontally across the page, 2 lines from that line all the way to the top to make 3 columns. So this is how we start. It says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry, full stop. So that once my lines are drawn, that is the next action that I do. And so it's going to be one full resentment per page. So what it is going to look like is I am going to write mom, because that's usually how this goes. Mom in the first column, I flip the page, and then I write dad in the next first column, and then I flip the page, and then I write my ex, and then I flip the page, and then I maybe write my other ex, or it gets a little more varied, you know? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one name at a time, and I'm just going to focus on that. So I'm going to write mom, flip the page, dad, flip the page, the ex, flip the page, my boss, flip the page, my coworkers, flip the page, my employees, flip the page, the page during the big book study, flip the page. And so we start with, it doesn't matter what we start with in terms of just whatever comes to mind, write it down. There is no harm in writing down a resentment. I promise you there is no harm in it. The worst thing that could happen is that you waste 10 minutes of your life and have some more experience with inventory. Oh no, that's not bad. But there is real danger in leaving off a resentment, in leaving off a name. So when we look at people that we can resent, we're looking at family members. So mom, dad, siblings. We can look at children. We can look at aunts, uncles, cousins. We can also look at coworkers and people that we work with. We can look at people in AA. We can look at people in our treatment center or sober living environment. We can look at people that we've never met before. We can look at there's the whole variety of just whoever we might come into contact with. Maybe they're famous. Then we look at institutions. AA can be an institution, our treatment center, our job, the health, hospitals, doctors, the legal system, the treatment center industry. I'm just trying to think of some more institutions. Maybe a sports team. Maybe your sports team keeps breaking your heart. Write it down. Also, if you have a resentment towards God, this is where you put it. Column 1, God, flip the page. This is how we get freedom from it. If I got a resentment towards AA, that's an institution or home group, or maybe there's a meeting that does it wrong, or a big book study that does it wrong, like this one. Write this one down, flip the page. Now, principles, God, higher power. It can be organized religion. It can be books in organized religion, various religious texts. It could also be things like having to write inventory. I can write inventory on my inventory. I can resent having to be honest. I can resent having to make amends. I can resent having to be open or willing or humble. I can resent, I've genuinely written some inventory. I've resented the 9 step promises. Guess what I wasn't doing? Step 9. I resented the 9 step promises. I resented the principle of hope before, and so we can put that was delightful. Not before I did it, but after. It was really cool. So whatever comes to mind, you can write it down. You can look up a step 4 resentment prompt sheet, just some names that might fit for you. You can also, if you got social media, sometimes having a quick scroll on your friends list can percolate some names. But I want to go name, flip the page, name, flip the page, name, flip the page, name, flip the page, whether it's a name of a person, an institution, or principle. And then when that is all done, I get into column 2. Now it says, so when that's all done, now there's real value in doing one column at a time. Part of the value is because I believe the book is asking me to do one column at a time. But part of the value in one column at a time is it also takes a lot of the emotionality out of it, where I'm not getting wrapped up in the story and in the feelings. I want to just see it for what it really is. I'm not dismissing my feelings or ignoring my feelings, but so often I can get wrapped up in the story. And so column 2, once I've gotten all my names down, column 2 is we asked ourselves why we were angry. So why do I have this resentment? And you'll see in this little diagram that I have, it says point form. point form. If you look at the example on page 65, I don't think there's one that's longer than, I believe it's 17 words. I haven't counted recently. Point form. I don't need to tell you every single time my mom forgot me from soccer practice. You know what I mean? I want to, but also, let's be real. Let's be petty. This is the only point in the step work where you get to use swear words. Like if you want to use some of the big swear words, you want to use the C word, you do you. This is the only place you're allowed to do it. So get it out. So be as petty as you really are. Don't try to like spiritual yourself up. Like, ooh, no. Be as petty as you really are in column 2. But point form, because I don't need to get into the whole story. I want to get it out, but I just want to like point form. Boom, 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 boom. And then when all of my column 2s are done, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at column 3. So it says, in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burnt up. Sore and burnt up means I got a resentment. It's just 1930. Sore is like that hurt my feelings. Burnt up is I'm angry about that. I got some anger going on. So we were sore. We were burnt up. On our grudge list, we set opposite. So a lot of people take their third column from the bottom of 64. But for me, I take it from the top of 65 because it says on our grudge list, we set opposite. And that feels like the direction. But I want you to know, whether you get your third column from the bottom of 64 or the top of 65 or a hodgepodge, you'll notice that it is going to be different than the example that we're going to see on page 65. And this is an example where I believe that beyond a shadow of a doubt, we have clear-cut directions and there is some wiggle room. There's some wiggle room. Like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. If I write financial security and you write pocketbook, I'm not relapsing because of that. You're not relapsing because of that. It's okay. It's okay. And so on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. So I take my third column from this list. And I don't do a lot of extended third column work. There can be tremendous value in it. But what I am trying to do in the third column is I am trying to see the depth of the resentment. Bear with me. I'll explain it as we go. So it says, was it our self-esteem? Now, my self-esteem is how I feel about myself. And so if this resentment made me feel worse about myself, made me feel unworthy, unlovable, just made me feel upset with myself, lowered my self-esteem, I just write self-esteem. It's just that simple. Just that simple. And then it says our security. Now, I break security down into 3 types of security: physical security, emotional security, and financial security. And then don't worry if it was like, but my pocketbooks, we got you, financial security, don't you worry. So so bear with me. With physical security, did this resentment cause me physical harm? Was I physically threatened? Did I feel as though I would be physically harmed? And it's, if it's true for you, it's true, write it down. Emotional security. Was I emotionally threatened? Was I emotionally harmed? Was there emotional abuse? If so, yeah, write it down. And then financial security. Did it affect my money? Did they take my things? Did it affect my job? If yes, write it down. I just write financial security. And then personal relations. Did this situation, this resentment affect my relationship with non-romantic people? With any of my platonic relationships, did it affect them? If yes, write it down. If no, don't write it down. And did it affect sex relations? And that would be my romantic or sexual relationships. Did it affect them? And then it talks about our ambitions. Sorry, I got a little out of order. Ambitions. So with ambition, my ambition is my desire to go and do things in the future. So did it affect my desire to go out and do things in the future? So a way to look, and I'm really big on if it is true for you, it's true. So you don't need to justify it. You don't need to explain it. If it makes sense to you, it makes sense to you. But imagine, like for ambition, if I had a teacher that was really mean to me, that might affect my ambition, my desire to go to school and to learn and to try. And I might have just been like, nah, I'm dumb. I don't want to do it. That affected my ambition. If somebody physically threatened me, that's going to affect my physical security. If I felt emotionally unsafe, that's going to affect my emotional security. Now, I don't have to have engaged in a romantic or sexual connection with the person, or if there's an institution or principle that fits for column 1, for that to be in my sex relations. So for example, maybe when I was growing up, my mom didn't appreciate the men that I was dating. It was like, you can't date them. And then, so that would then be, that affects my sex relations. Or let's say I have a boss that's asking me to work overtime. You know, I'm asked to work overtime all the time and I'm not able to spend time with my partner or my spouse. That would affect my sex relations. And so what we're going to see is if I have a deep, deep resentment, this resentment is going to be, I call them a full house. And that's where it affects each and every single one of them. And another way to say it, another way to look at it is a deep resentment is going to affect all these areas of my life. So the more areas of my life that are affected, the deeper the resentment, and the deeper the resentment, the more areas of my life that are affected, which is just how desperately I need to be free of them. And so what I do is when and don't worry, I'm wrapping up here in just a sec. I on the time, I gotcha. So when I sit down with sponsees, what I do is I physically sit with them as they write their inventory. And what I have found is when I do that, we can get columns 1, 2, and 3 done in like an hour, sometimes 2. And then we're right in the middle of it and there's no time to be scared. And I just remembered another example of a principle can be old guiding sayings, like kids should be seen and not heard, or good girls do this. Other examples of principles can include things like nationality, like these grand concepts, different political or economic systems, belief systems. Those can all fit under principles. So I just wanted to make sure I got all of those. And then, so call 1, 2, 3, I can get that done in like an hour or 2. And I want to do it again, 1 column at a time. And you know what? That's a perfect place to leave it. And I'm over time 2 minutes, so we'll leave it there.